Um, over the last few years, I've been asked to kind of explain various topics in photography, and I am thankful that I get to actually kind of teach a lot of that stuff. But one of the things that's kind of come up that I really don't address in a class because I'm not all about people starting up businesses. The class is really about the introduction of photography and getting people familiar with their equipment and being comfortable with certain settings. But one thing that actually comes up a lot is the surprise that people have as to why photographers charge as much as they do. A lot of people that they look at stuff and they think that photography is an incredibly expensive thing to hire, and a lot of people can't afford that investment or that expense or however you want to kind of sell it like that. A lot of photographers use the word investment kind of a fancy way to just market them, and it's their way of trying to sell the people on why it's a worthwhile expense to hire a photographer to do that. Um, so what I want to kind of do today is I would love to actually, while editing some photos and continue working, just so I'm not this guy who's just sitting here talking to you and boring you to death. And I didn't really want to do a podcast style. And I'll show you some before and afters on the photos that I'm actually working on and stuff like that. But I do want to kind of give people an idea as to why um, photography today, while cheaper than film, also is much more expensive than film, which I know is a total contradiction right out of the gate. But give me a little bit of time and you'll kind of see where I'm going to go with that. Um, Back in the day when you started with film, you needed a camera, you needed a lens, and you needed some film. Okay, you can go probably spend $500, get a decent SLR style camera. Um, Now you'll notice I said SLR because before digital, it was just a single lens reflex camera. There was no digital with it, so you actually had to put the film in yourself. And so, let's say you spend $4 on a roll of 36 exposures, which would be incredibly cheap for high quality film. I mean, that is going to be some bargain basement stuff right there. And then you also go buy a lens. And you can spend anywhere from $50 for a cheap lens all the way up to thousands of dollars. So let's say you go and spend $1,000 on a really good quality lens. You got $1,500 plus $4, and that's what it costs to get started. That's all you needed. You didn't need the batteries, you didn't need anything else. Just literally go outside, snap some pictures, and well, to look at them, you had to get them developed. And most people did not have the ability to develop color film in their house. So what they were having to do, they were having to take them to a 1 hour lab or a next day turnaround lab, or send them off, or just whatever their choice was based on the quality of prints that they were liking. So to do that, and I pulled out some old film that I had done just for comparison, and it was costing me at Jim Lab and Lens, which is a place that I really respected here in Hutchinson. It was costing me 25 cents per print of 4x6 or 3x5s, depending on whatever size you wanted. They were actually both the same for some reason. So 25 cents. So let's say you did a roll of 36 exposures and they all turn out. If they were pure black and pure white, a lot of times photo printing places will not charge you for that. They'll just kind of let you just have that as a free gift. Sometimes they would, especially if it felt like you were abusing that on a regular basis. But so let's say you got 36 exposures and they all turned out worth keeping. So 36 and a quarter of that, nice, fun, simple, round math, is going to be $9. So it's going to cost you $9 before Uncle Sam gets his hands in your wallet to get those pictures developed. Okay, so you take that $9, you add that $4 for the film originally, you got $13 for every 36 photos, and that's just to get the 4x6s. If you want to get larger prints, as with digital, it's going to cost a little bit more, but you still needed to get them developed. You literally couldn't just take a picture with your camera and then open up the roll and take a look at it there. It had to be developed. And whether you did that yourself or send it off, it still takes some expense because you got to buy all the stuff for the bath. You got to do all that kind of stuff. The developing stuff was not necessarily cheap, and it took a lot more time. So $13 to do it in the most simplest way. Take the pictures, you get them there in an hour, you get to see your pictures, then you get to see if they turned out or not. And you actually had to pay money to see if they turned out or not. So $13. Now think about that. Now, let's say over the course of your career, film and digital, you take 100,000 photos. Now, if your career is photography, you're going to take way more than 100,000 pictures. You're going to be upwards of a million plus when all said and done, depending on what type of photographer you're going to be. So, but let's say 100,000 photos, okay, just for simple calculations here. So we've already talked about, we have the film camera we paid $500 for. We paid $1,000 for the lens, and then we paid $4 for the film, but we're going to actually just kind of leave that for a second because we're going to do some other math. So $1,500 to get started before you're actually ready to take any pictures, okay? So we're just going to take that $1,500, we're just going to put it aside, and we're going to figure that up here in a little bit. But let's say we're taking that 100,000 photos, okay, and you get 36 pictures per roll of film, okay? So what that's going to come out to be, and somehow I hit tab here. So it's going to be 100,000 divided by 36, and you have 2,778 rolls of film for you to be able to do that. Okay. Now we already talked about it. You're already going to make or spend $4 per roll, so you're now at $11,000, $111.11 just to get those 100,000 pictures. But you still can't see them. You still haven't seen them. So now what you have to do is you have to take that 100,000 and you have to multiply it times the cost of a 4x6 or a 3x5, whatever size you get. We're going to say 25 cents. So now you have to add $25,000 to that. Okay? So you have $25,000 plus $11,111.11. You got $36,111 for 100,000 photos. That's pretty crazy. Okay? That is literally just to have the bare minimum of taking the pictures and then getting to take a look at them. Now you add the $1,500 into that, and it's kind of peanuts at this point. So you're looking at $37,611. Okay, that's to run a photo business where you took 100,000 photos. Now, before I get into the digital side of things, understand that I fully acknowledge that most photographers who did film were never going to need to do 100,000 photos, okay? Because they were a lot more methodical. They were actually way more careful. They took the light readings, they composed the shot, they planned it, they knew exactly where the lighting was going to be, the reflectors, they had assistants. Everything was actually planned out really well because they had to make every frame count. Most film photographers, if they took 36 pictures, most of those 36 pictures are going to actually be good. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. Now you do get the chance, the opportunity sometimes where people blink and it can be a missed shot. So maybe they take a second shot. They just try to play it safe and stuff like that. But they weren't just doing like they are with digital cameras today. So it's not an apples to apples type of comparison because of the mentality and the skill level that was existing during film compared to what we have with digital today. Okay, so just understand that. I know that I'm not saying that, but we are playing the math game here, and we're trying to treat this as equal to some degree because realistically, they should be equal. But we have the luxury today where they don't have to be. Okay, so realistically, 100,000 photos should equal 100,000 photos as far as how much it's going to cost you to do your business. So now we got digital cameras. Okay. For a digital camera, you're going to probably spend, let's say $500 again. Okay, let's say it's kind of a mid, lower entry level camera, and then we're going to buy a $1,000 lens for that as well. Okay, we're at $1,500. We do need a memory card. Okay, we do need a storage card. So let's say we're going to spend another, let's say $50. Let's say we're going to buy a fairly decent one, and it's going to be now at $1,550 for us to start our digital photography little business. Because mostly when you buy the digital camera, you get the battery that comes with it. Okay, everything else for the most part is ready to go. You now have $1,550 invested, and when you take a picture, you can now see exactly what it's going to look like. You don't have to go get it printed. You don't have to do anything. And you realistically, with a lot of the modern devices, you can transfer the photo from your camera to your mobile device, and then you could actually tack that on if you want. So realistically, you could do your entire business of digital photography with only $1,550, and that's assuming the $1,000 lens, $500 camera, and a $50 memory card. If you get all that stuff much cheaper, you can realistically do this business a lot cheaper than that. Now, here's the downside, okay? The downside to that is your pictures are going to look exactly in a way that most everybody else has the ability to do, okay? You put the same camera in two different people's hands, there's an opportunity where both people are going to take the photos the exact same way. It was the same thing with film. The only thing was, film took such a particular level of skill so you couldn't have the instant gratification to look at the stuff and weed things out and see in real time how it's going to look. So you had far less people who could do it. So if you were to take two people with digital who actually has fairly decent skills, both of them are going to go photograph the same thing, there's a good chance that they're both going to take a very similar photo. It could also be way different, but there's still a chance it's going to turn out very similar. So with digital, what allows us to stand out that we really couldn't do with film is we now get to spend time editing it. We get to post-process it. We get to actually make the colors pop. We get to remove artifacts that either shouldn't have been there, or maybe it looks better because it's not there. For example, like if there's acne on a young person's face, there's no shame in removing that, because either they could do a better makeup job, if they have a little bit more means to be able to do that, or you wait 2-3 weeks and their face starts to clear up. There's so many ways you can get around doing it. So fixing that in post is, I think, a privilege that we have now with digital photography that we did not have with film as easily. You can still do it with film, but absolutely 100% far more of a chore before digital software started to make our lives a lot easier. Okay, so with digital photography, we have the ability to turn every photo into magazine quality. Those photos that you see on the newsstands at the grocery store, way back in the day, only the best of the best were finding their way on the cover of those things. And then you see a lot of photos on some of those tabloids that weren't hiring professional photographers, so to speak. They had lesser quality, but still better than what most people could really do then. And nowadays, though, you don't see the cover of any magazines where it's not edited so incredibly well. You do see some of them that kind of do a crappy job, and they really kind of stand out that way. But for the most part, there's so many resources out there. There's so many people who could do it. There's a lot of photographers, they don't edit their own stuff. They take the pictures, they send it on, and some other agency or person will actually be the one who processes the images. And so it's just a whole two different skill sets. Some people are great at taking pictures. Some people absolutely suck at post-processing, and vice versa. And then there's sometimes you find people who can actually do both. And that's really what kind of the mid to small market really is, are people who are having to do both because they can't afford to give up a lot of their profits by sending them off to have someone else do that stuff. So I think that's a privilege and an honor that we get to be part of that. I started with film. I remember what a pain it was to really just get it perfect, especially out of the gate. You didn't really get to do as much run and gun as what you can now. And back then, you really didn't get to do video. You had to have your own separate camcorder. You weren't going to do film and take pictures on the same device. That just wasn't going to happen. So nowadays, we actually have that with basically every single digital camera, including our cell phones, where you have a video camera and a stills camera just right there ready to go, where press of a button or a tap on the screen will allow you to switch between the two of them. So digital cameras digital photography is definitely much cheaper to operate. However, here's what is not usually considered in the equation of why do people charge so much, which I don't think most people charge too much. I really think that actually most people charge too little, just based off of my own experience. And that is, we have to have a computer. We have to store these devices. We have to pay for software subscriptions. We have to then pay for maybe cloud storage. Any one of these things could possibly fail. Then we got to upgrade those things. We got to, replace them. We have to have more devices with that. Your computer, let's say you have a 600 watt power supply on your computer and you're pegging that thing out while it's processing images. Well, think about that. If it's 600 watt power supply, that's like leaving 10 60-watt bulbs on nonstop. And remember how much we're always told by our parents, turn off the lights, electricity is not free type of thing. Well, your computer could essentially be anywhere between, like 5 to 15 or even 20 of those 60-watt bulbs on all day long. A lot of people, they might even have 1,000-watt power supplies in their computers. And if it's using the resources fully while processing video, audio, photos, whatever, it's sitting there draining electricity. And you could put something in between the two devices to measure how much electricity it's drawing on a regular basis. And you could calculate how much of your electric bill is actually your computer. It's actually going to be noticeable. I'm not saying it's going to come close to maybe your air conditioner, but it's still one of the most power drawing things in a lot of homes. Microwaves are a lot, but microwaves, remember, they're only on for a couple of minutes at a time. Your computer might be on 24/7. So just kind of keep that in mind. So those little expenses like that definitely add up as well, but they still don't come close to that 30 something thousand dollars it costs to operate a film business. But here's where it is a lot more valuable. We spend a lot more time in the digital age with photography and the editing the photos and culling the images and working with the different technologies there than what we had to do with film. Film, we took the picture and we were able to send that off, and then we'd get the proofs back or maybe just the negatives. We let some other place do all the work for getting those images processed for us to take a look at. And you'd probably use a loop or something like that, and you look on a light table and you would actually take a look at how everything went, or you'd have the prints and you'd go through and you would pick the ones you want to keep, and you still had to keep those. And remember, if you scratched film or if you got something on there, when they go to print it again, well, that stuff's going to show up on there because that is the actual recorded media of it, as opposed to a digital camera where it's just a stored file, and it's going to be as safe as however you keep your data safe. So if you have backup storage in a cloud, maybe some RAID configurations at your house, whatever, you could keep those things completely blemish free. Especially if you work with RAW photos, you could essentially keep those untouched, sit them in a folder somewhere, and then just manipulate a copy somewhere, and then you would never really lose that unless you lose a hard drive. But that's where backing up your data is incredibly important, and also an expense that goes into digital photography. So kind of keep that in mind. I mean, back in the day, yeah, you took the pictures. You spent more time preparing for the pictures. I will say that generally. But then you didn't have to worry about them so much until you got them back. With digital, though, you're going through the photos. You're storing the photos. You're spending the time editing. You're finding the colors you want to do. You're finding the look. You're sending them off to the client. You're doing the back and forth. Oh, can you fix this? Can you do this? These are things you do now that you didn't really do way back in the days of film. So the biggest expense that we have now that we did not have back then is our time. I can honestly say that's what it is, and that's why when I hear people say that $300-400 is a lot of money for senior pictures, I really don't think it is. And that's even if the photographer is somewhat entry level, because you really don't see how much time they put into the behind the scenes. If you were to sit over my shoulder and you watch me edit some of these photos, you'd be like, wow, you really spent 40 minutes on that one photo? Yeah, because I thought that's how long it took to make that photo just absolutely come to life and be what that person deserved it to come out to be. Sometimes they only take a few minutes, kind of depends on how close I am to the subject. If I do a real close-up of somebody, you start to see pores, you start to see necessarily hairs that maybe they didn't want, or you see blemishes, you see all kinds of stuff. But if you take a further back photo, a lot of times you're not going to see any of that, so you can process those photos a heck of a lot faster. So hopefully this helped everybody kind of understand a little bit what kind of goes into the decision for why photography costs so much. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I'll upload these 2 photos so you can take a look at the before and after. Thank you very much.